When designing instruction, whether it's delivered in a lecture format or you're creating standalone educational materials, it's important to understand how the brain processes information. The information processing theory has been studied for decades and is the most complete explanation, at least conceptually, of how we learn. This theory suggests that our cognitive abilities are based on the interaction of memory stages. These stages work together to help us encode, store, and retrieve information efficiently and effectively. The first stage is sense memory. Stimuli from the outside world is received by our ears, eyes, touch, smell, and taste. This memory is very, very short, as little as a half a second, and very limited in what it can actually process at one time. Things that are not attended to are forgotten. Things that are attended to get passed on to our working memory. Working memory is where we process the information we have received. Our brains try to make sense of the information. We have what are called executive functions that help us do that. We look for patterns, we look for things we already know, we look for significant cues, and so on. This process encodes or tags the information so that we can recall it later. Working memory capacity is also limited and can only handle so much of chunks of information at one time. It's also limited in how long it can focus on the information before it gets lost. Any information we do not encode or do not encode effectively is forgotten. And now that what we have processed and encoded goes onto our long-term memory. If it's encoded effectively, we can retrieve it when we need it. You can compare this system to a filing cabinet with trillions of files located in millions of filing cabinets. If your labels on the folder are meaningful, well marked, and organized, like say in alphabetical order, you can usually get the file you need. If the labels are simply labeled documents, or there's no rhyme or reason to their location, finding the correct file will be nearly impossible. A few things to consider when developing instruction that is related to these processes. Make sure your instruction gets the learner's attention so it passes to the working memory. Minimize distractions like background noise or music or unnecessary images in your materials. Since working memory is limited, do not present too many things at one time, or some of them will be forgotten. About 5 items is a good rule of thumb, depending on the complexity of the information and the learner's prior knowledge. Think of your working memory as a glass that can only hold so much water. If you put too much into it, you're going to lose it. The information should also be well organized and presented in a manner that is easy to encode. The use of graphic organizers to show relationships, charts and graphs, illustrations, and bold or underlined text to indicate importance can help this process. And build upon the learner's prior knowledge by relating it to new information, to something they already understand. You can compare and contrast things, use metaphors, or explain relationships with things they already know. Now, there are some exceptions to these procedures. Sometimes a stimuli is so strong or meaningful it will trigger something in long-term memory without going through working memory. You may not be paying attention to the chatter in a busy restaurant, but if your ears hear your name spoken, you will immediately attend to it. Similarly, I know for me there are certain smells that instantly take me back to my grandmother's cooking in her kitchen. As I stated earlier, working memory can be overloaded and not encode all the information. An extreme example is when your brain needs to focus on something that is vital, like reacting to an impending car accident. Non-essential information will be discarded so you can try to avoid or minimize the accident. For this reason, a surprisingly large number of people involved in accidents cannot recall the color of the vehicle or other details. This is a little bit like how if we're driving and we're looking for a specific street address or a street name, we usually turn the music off and tell the kids to be quiet so we can focus on what we're doing. That is your brain automatically trying to shut out distractions so that it can focus on the job at hand. I hope this helps a little bit as far as looking at how we learn. There are other factors involved, of course. We all have emotions. We all have fatigue. We all have different types of reactions to different types of information. Obviously, if we're not motivated or curious, that's going to be a factor. But all things considered, this is a general way that our brains work on information. Thank you.